Welcome to another Colin Crandall interview. You guys know me from MMA Power Hour, MMA from London to LA, credentialed media with UFC, PFL, Bellator, and One Championship. My series of interviewing the best and the brightest in our sport of MMA. And we have a coach who is respected by everyone. And I still can't find anyone that says anything bad about this man. He is the head coach of Factory X, Mr. Marc Montoya. Welcome to the show, Coach.
Hey, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure and an honor, and you're doing a great job. Continue to do that. Keep killing it, and look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you so much. Me too. You know, it's interesting. In the coaching world, like in any world, it seems like there's very few people that everyone really likes. And, you know, I'm sure you know from growing up, you can't be all things to all people. One man's meat's another man's poison and so on. But I think there's only like you and a couple other coaches that people don't trash. And it's interesting because, you know, a lot of other coaches are good guys, but it seems like there's always someone that says that guy was ruder than hell to me when I met him, or that guy didn't treat my brother good when he was training under him. And can't find anyone that says that about you. And I think that's something that is important to you, to be someone that's known to be fair and respectful. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my intention is to necessarily be liked by everybody, because I think anytime you're doing great things, you're going to have opposition and you're going to have competition, and that's great. I mean, I encourage all of that stuff, but I also want to, just treat people like I want to be treated, and so it's that old adage, that old proverb essentially is that, and it's. We live in such a competitive space that myself and any other coach or athlete that's in our MMA space, we all want to do great things and be great at what we're doing, and I think that's the whole goal. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're only known for your legacy is going to be how, yeah, of course, some of the things you did, but how people felt when you were done meeting them. And I think the most important thing is to always stay hungry, but stay humble too. And I'm a fan of MMA, even though I'm a coach in it. I've been a fan of boxing, combat sports, MMA, all that stuff as I was growing up, and continue to flourish inside of the MMA space. So, the fans, I'm one of them, and so I'm not really much different. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, my profession is doing this, but I came from those same exact roots, and so I just feel like, I want, when I meet somebody, I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. I'm just who I am, and I want them to leave that meeting saying, feeling good about themselves, because at the end of the day, that's what interaction with human beings should be. I mean, and again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be competitive and all that stuff, because that's our job. But and you're going to create opposition and people that are wanting to come and kick your ass, and that's okay. I encourage that too, because that's the space you live in. But what's the legacy you're living in? And that's ultimately what I think you're alluding to.
Absolutely, 100%. And I feel the same way even more lately. Unfortunately, my wife of 18 years passed away 7 weeks ago. And one thing that's hit me along with tremendous heartbreak and sadness is that I just want to be an even better person. I'm remembering back a few times where, she had to call me a jackass, and I was. And I'm thinking, man, in her memory, I really want to try to have very few moments where people have to call me a jackass or worse. And so, that's something I agree with 100%. On that note, I'm sure there's a competition between coaches in a friendly way, and that a lot of times you face the same coaches. I know that you faced was it Dustin? Yeah, with Dustin Jacoby, you faced Coach Saif Saud in the last fight against Kennedy Nzechukwu, and ironically enough, you're facing Coach Saif again coming up here with Alonzo Menefield. I'm not talking about him specifically, but I'm sure coaches have a friendly rivalry. But is there ever anything more? Like, one thing we never see because the camera's not there, are there ever times where a coach is like, hey, it's good to see you, coach, I got you, your guy's going down, sorry, you can't do anything about it, I feel bad? But is there ever any trash talk at all between the coaches? And if so, I'm not going to ask you who.
I mean, there's healthy competition for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, the coaches were fighters first, and so we were all fighters at one point, and the gray hairs in our beard, or some of us don't have hair like myself. Yeah, exactly. But the age is put us in a different realm now. But I mean, at the end of the day, all those coaches are fighters, or were fighters, still are. And so, the thing is there's always healthy competition there. I mean, the when you get to the level of what you were just talking about, like the UFC level, the coaches that are there consistently are there for a reason. And there's definitely respect for them. There's also the competition of wanting to see your athlete prevail over theirs, and I mean, that's the sport we're in. And so but I would say for the most part there's nothing but a camaraderie amongst the coaching world and realm, because the job is hard. It's a hard
Absolutely.
job. It's not. I'm not complaining, but it's just a hard job. I mean, it's the fighting piece is only part of it. The mentoring and all of that piece is so huge with coaching, and so there's a lot of sacrifice that happens on the coaching side, for away from your family and friends, and your gyms that you're building and all those things. And so there's camaraderie there because of some of the struggles. There's also camaraderie there because of the times that you prevail as well. And so, but yeah, there's healthy competition there. But someone like Safe, you mentioned, I have nothing but a lot of respect for him and what he's continued to grow and build. And there's coaches out there, Henry Hoof, that Trevor Whitman. There's coaches out there that I respect a ton, and have watched just grow some amazing programs and great fighters, and they're good people, and I like seeing those people on the road. And when we face each other, it's business, and when we're done, it's still that respect that we've all earned is given there. And so I would be lying to you if I said every time we faced each other, regardless of the coach, whomever's on the other side, you want to go and you want to get the job done. I mean, our job is to go in there and find a way to find victory. And so, it's healthy. It's healthy that way. I mean, you got some young up and coming coaches that have done some great things. Like Nick Sick is doing some good stuff, and so all those coaches, man, that are a part of this is yeah, I would say it's healthy. It's a healthy competitive environment.
Absolutely. If you had to guess, how many coaches have a notebook somewhere that says we're 10-6 against ATT, we're 8-7 against Factory X, we're 4-1 against Kill Cliff? How many coaches, if you had to guess, what percentage have something like that down on note paper?
I don't know what the percentage is. I know for a fact that I have that notebook. And so, there it's again, just reiterating what I said earlier, we're all fighters at the beginning, and still. And so, there's competition there. There's places where you want to get better, and places where you've done some good work. And so, yeah, I mean, you like when you were fighting and you were training with guys internally, you'd make that list to be like, man, I'm getting that guy back for that armbar he caught me in, or whatever was going on. And so, and it's not that it's healthy competition. It's something that drives you to be better. And the losses are are some of the ways that you grow. And so, and the wins are the way that you prevail, but you also can grow from those too, if you don't lose sight of the fact just how hard it is to win. I mean, it's not easy to do that. And the gyms that do that consistently, it's not easy. And you can't ever take a win for granted, whether it's on the regional scene, local scene, or in the biggest stage. These major promotions like the UFC or what have you. So either way, those things are tough. But I would say, I don't know what your question is. What's the percentage? I have no idea. I know I have, but I keep track of our record every year, and I've done that since we started, since 2008.
Nice. That makes sense. That's a lot of paper or a lot of computer space, bandwidth, or one of the two, but it's well worth it, I'm sure. Give me your quick thought on this one. I have so much stuff I want to ask, and I think we've only got about 15, 20 minutes left. Uh, when you fight a fighter from one gym and then you fight one of his teammates a few months later, obviously the teammate is going to try to help and say, all right, here's what this guy felt. He was a lot stronger here. He wasn't as strong here. He didn't like this. He did like that. Does that give any kind of a notable advantage? I would imagine if so, not very much. But is that something that a team can get kind of excited about, saying, my guy here fought him a few months ago, and now my other guy that trains with my guy every day is fighting him? How can that help a lot, or is it something that's not really that deep?
Well, MMA math is pretty confusing. It doesn't ever 1 and 1 usually equals 3, and so it's like the math of MMA is interesting. So I say this to my guys a lot, just because if you went out there and you fought with X fighter, and then let's say you won, and then the next guy is going to fight that guy. You can't get caught up on that guy won or lost against this guy, because they're all different fighters. And so yes, there are some tendencies that can be discussed and talked about and planned for. There's some insight that a fighter can get that they didn't have prior to being in there with them. And so yes, there are some advantages. Potentially there's some disadvantages with that too, though. Because it maybe felt strong to you, but the next guy that he's going to fight doesn't feel strong to him. And it could put you in a different mindset. And so, I think ultimately there's some tendencies there that you look for, especially on my side as a coach. We look for those tendencies that can utilize our strengths, and then we go and try to, attack those and make those a weakness, so that we can find a path of success and victory. And so, I don't. It can be an advantage in a way. It can be a disadvantage too, in a way. And so I think you just can't put too much weight into the win or loss, because they're different athletes, and they're different styles, and they're different mentalities, and there's different pathways to find success in there. And so there are a few things that you can touch on, but mostly it's how are we going to build X fighter to go and capitalize on our strengths and bring out their weaknesses. That's ultimately what it's about.
Makes sense. Well, let me read off a list of your people, because I know once in a while people move around or whatever, but tell me if you still got all these guys. I think forever you're going to have Lionheart Smith, and I know you have Brandon Royval, Vince Pichel, you got Chris Gutierrez, Jonathan Martinez, you got Dustin Jacoby, Isaac Bulgarian, all those guys still Factory X?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Of course.
Fantastic. So I know what we got next is my man, Vince from Hell, Pichel. He's a really cool dude. I interviewed him a few years back, and I was glad I wasn't worried at that time about any cursing, because Vince had about 100 different names. It was great though, man. The guy's colorful as hell. He speaks his mind. He's a real dude. That's one thing. You talk to Vince, and I don't know that he does a ton of interviews, but when you talk to him, he's going to keep it real. Really good guy. Amazing dude. He's kind of an anomaly. He's 40 years old now, but he doesn't have a lot of miles on him. He's really I think did maybe a little bit of kickboxing before MMA. Maybe I'm wrong, but I know he was training for a while with the legendary Pete Sugarfoot Cunningham when I first interviewed him. And I also interviewed Pete because I'm a Gen X guy. I remember watching, I was quite young, but I remember watching Sugarfoot Cunningham in kickboxing. He was amazing. But Vince has a good fight coming up here, and it's going to be really interesting to see what he does. Also, you still got Vanessa Demopoulos, right?
Vanessa actually is in Vegas now, but we have guys like David Onama,
Yes.
AJ Fletcher, Julian Marquez, those kind of guys for sure.
Absolutely.
Yusuf Zalal.
Yep, Yusuf is great. So let's pull up Vince Pichel here, and I had him there, and then he all of a sudden went away. So Vince has a good fight coming up here, and there we go, against Ismail Bonfim. Now that seems to me like that's going to be a striker's delight. Anyone that doesn't like wrestling or is bored with wrestling probably isn't going to see it. Although it seems almost like if things start going wrong, one fighter or another might do some wrestling, but maybe not. Give me, and I got so many other questions, but give me a minute or less on it. Well, on a game plan, but you probably don't want to because it's then all of a sudden you put it out there. Give me your thoughts on that matchup. How about it, and what you think Vince brings to that?
Well, Vince is definitely a seasoned vet. You know, he doesn't have, like you had mentioned, he doesn't have a crazy amount of UFC fights for as long as he's been in the UFC. And some of that has been his patience, some of that has been, you know, injury riddled times. And so, you know, Vince is a heck of a guy. He's fun to be around. He's absolutely a man's man, and he's someone that, you know, we really enjoy fighting, or excuse me, training here. And so he, you know, with a matchup like this, you got a younger up and coming prospect against, you know, more of a vet in Vince. And so those matchups are always interesting. And, you know, I think statistically they've shown that the younger fighters typically win more than the vets do. And they just show the statistic actually, or I recently saw it, they might have shown it earlier than this, but I recently saw it when Chris Gutierrez and Jonathan Martinez fought when we were in the back. They actually put that up on the screen. And it was interesting because both of my guys at the time fighting were, you know, we were looking at that. We're like, oh, that's an interesting fact. And so, you know, the thing is with Vince is that he's so well rounded that, you know, regardless of where this fight goes, we feel very confident. Now you've got a young up and coming Brazilian fighter who wants to come out and make a statement. He wants to show that, hey, I'm gonna use Vince as a stepping stone essentially, and show that, you know, doesn't matter if you've been in this sport or not, I can go do the job. And so, you know, the kid's explosive, and he has shown to be, you know, absolutely have some power, and he's athletic. And so, you know, the thing for us is how do we neutralize that, and how do we go and capitalize on that. And the good part is this weekend in Sao Paulo, Brazil, you guys will get a chance to see what we're about and what we're going to go out and apply and do inside the cage. And so you got that classic matchup of younger up and coming guy versus more of a vet, and I like our chances a lot in this fight. I think Vince is one thing he is for sure is he's a gamer, and probably one of the most present guys I've ever coached in the cage. You know, when he and I kind of have a conversation back and forth while he's fighting, he'll be like, "I didn't hear that," and then I'll repeat it back to him, and then he'll be like, "Got it." And so, you know, we have this. He's very present, and it's something I love that about him. And then part of that is his experience. He's able to stay locked in, but also hear a navigating voice in mine, and go through and continue to, you know, find ways to win fights. And so it's a fun matchup. And, you know, Vince and a couple of our coaches left today to go to Sao Paulo. I leave Thursday afternoon and meet them. And so, and it's been a fun puzzle to try to solve.
Absolutely. And Vince is one of the things about these veterans like him is they're very rugged, hard men. These are really guys that don't go in there and panic. They're guys that are used to the pain, and they're used to being able to stand in the fire. So that's one thing a lot of times odds makers forget about. If they look at age and they just say, well, this guy's young and this guy's not, but they don't realize that the older veterans are tough. It's just kind of like we used to say when we were in our 20s or late teens, you know, the toughest guy in the school, if he wants to fight my dad, good luck with that. Because my dad may be 50, and he will beat the living crap out of anybody that's 19 years old or 22, or that's not, you know, because of the difference in toughness and grit. So that's absolutely a true thing. And do you sometimes have fighters, and this is something I don't think I've ever heard anyone ask, you sometimes have fighters who say, Coach, try not to get me booked for something where I'm flying out of the country. I just hate flying out of the country. I don't like it. I don't want to go somewhere where I can't get my food that I like. I don't want to go somewhere where the water tastes different. Or you ever have any guys say that?
Yeah, it's flying overseas is not easy. It's a challenge in itself, from just the amount of time you're on the road, to the weight cut becomes different. The country's different, the food, the beds, the people, the smells, the everything is different. And so it's cool experience. I feel really blessed over the last 15 years to travel around the world and do that a bunch of times. And we're going back to Brazil. I think I've been to Brazil like 10 times now. And so it's I think the cool part when you have a fighter that hasn't done that a lot is that they get to lean on some of my experience of traveling and say, hey, this is what you're up against if you want to take this opportunity. And here's the good, and here's some of the things that you need to be aware of. And sometimes taxes are an issue. The guys get taxed heavily sometimes they go out of the country, and so yeah, expenses become higher when they go out of the country. To travel your team in becomes higher just because proximity equals more cash. And so, those things have to all be taken into consideration. Some fighters don't care at all. They don't care if they're fighting in Australia or if they're fighting in Vegas. They just want to get their opportunity and go do it. And some do. And then some are kind of in the middle. They don't know what they're getting into, and so just, hey, coach, what's that like? Yeah, you've done that before. You've done that 5 times before. Tell me what it's like. And so, we have those conversations. It's not an easy navigable just thing. Sometimes some guys just aren't. They hate it, and they don't want it. They just don't like it. And some guys love it and flourish. And so, you mentioned Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith and I, Dustin Jacoby and I, those two vets, we've traveled the world together a bunch and fought all over the place. And so, it's that stuff, those experiences, those moments and times that we've done that are forever etched in your memories. That's the cool part about that is when you go out of the country, it's pretty memorable. Even if you've been there a few times, it's pretty memorable. And so, because it's so different, it's not the cookie cutter thing we're used to in the States. And so, but yeah, the navigation of that is all dependent upon the fighter.
Absolutely. I was speaking about Lionheart. I would imagine, and Dustin, I would imagine that they're pretty regular sparring partners. But tell me this: when someone's a top, excuse me, a top 20 guy, top 15, top 10, and their teammate is as well, is it less likely that they're training a lot with each other, and more likely that they have guys who are kind of younger, who are not ranked that high, that are their primary sparring partners? Or is it sometimes common that you guys, two guys that are high in the rankings that are maybe one division apart, that will be regular sparring partners?
Well, I think every gym is different that way. I know I can only speak for Factory X. Factory X, I mean, these guys like Dustin and Anthony, for example, those guys train together constantly, even though they're, in the top 15. And so that iron that those two have, it would be a mistake, in my opinion, if they didn't sharpen each other with the iron that they've developed and built and forged over the years. And so, no, I mean, Chris, I just had a question the other day about Chris Gutierrez and Jonathan Martinez. I mean,
Right.
those guys are pretty much like back to back in the rankings right now, and asking me if those guys would ever fight. And then the thing is the answer is no. I mean, we have a real culture and camaraderie and team, and the thing is there's plenty of people to fight, and so, well, I don't care if it's the top 15 or not. The point, and I want to see them all flourish. But those two, part of the reason those two guys are so good, that Dustin and Anthony are so good, Chris and Jonathan, for example, are so good, especially in the proximity that they are in the rankings, is because they've had each other, and they've had each other to grow from. They've lost to each other in the gym. They've prevailed in the gym against each other. The competition continues. Just because one day one guy gets that other guy, it's very rare that you see that thing consistently stay on one side. It's back and forth constantly, and that's what makes these guys grow. And so, yeah, the young and up and coming guys are absolutely part of the success as well. So I'm not saying it's only those two guys. The young and up and coming guys are absolutely part of the success. But when you get that mixture of the vets and the top 15, top 10, top 20, whatever it is, you get that mixture, and then you get these young up and coming, wolves that are wanting to see what that water and land is, that enchanted land is all about. Then that mixture right there, I feel like is a great mixture to have success. And it's something that I've always looked at. Like, I don't want to rebuild. I've always wanted to reload. And I think a true definition of a great coach is, can you consistently produce new talent year after year after year, and do it? Can you do it internally? And can you continue to grow and blossom these kids? If you'll do that, at least from my perspective, business wise, my business model, if you'll do that, you'll create vets like Anthony and Dustin. But you also have young up and comers like Chris and Jonathan, Yusuf Salal, Josh Frem, those kind of kids that are coming up and pushing those guys. And so, that's the thing is when you have that mixture, you have that kind of internal growth, the sky's the limit, and you see a lot of good things happen.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Let me ask you about the cage size. We got the smaller cage at the apex, and I think everywhere else it's pretty uniform. Am I right on that, or is that something you're aware of?
No, it's the UFC obviously has the apex style cage, that fight night cage, and then they have more of the pay-per-view cage, and the difference is about 5 feet. I think the apex cage is 25 flat. It's either 25 or 27 flat, and then the pay-per-view cage is 30 flat. And so the cage we have at Factory X is more like the fight night cage. It's that size. But you have places like Bellator who, they don't even have corners. It's just a rounded cage, and it's a big cage. It's about 30-ish flat, so it's like the pay-per-view cage that the UFC has. PFL is a little bit different, and so yeah, they're not uniform per se. They are structured either big or more like the fight night cages, but some of these local shows, you take one step and you're at the center. And
right.
So,
yeah, I noticed that. We used to have like 20-foot cages, I think, years back. Is this something that comes into play in your strategizing with the fighters, or is this something that you want your fighters to be mindful of, or that you find they are mindful of or thinking about?
Yeah, there's definitely a strategy inside of both cages. The bigger cage, you have more room to move about. You have more room to potentially cut someone off and take them down. So, on both sides, there's some navigation stuff. In the fight night cage, for these bigger fighters, meaning in weight, 170 and up, it's like 2 steps and they're at the center. And so it's not that big, but they're used to that, at least at Factory X, because that's the size cage that we spar in and train in. And so, yeah, there's definitely some strategy stuff there. It matters for sure. I think it definitely matters. The cage awareness and navigation and IQ is a big deal. And to know whether you're in the pay-per-view cage or the fight night cage is going to matter. And yes, some of the game plan is going to be predicated on the size of that cage.
Superstition. What percentage of, I guess you can only speak on your fighters without mentioning names, what percentage would you say have superstitions such as, I've lost every time I go to Brazil, I don't want to go there, or I've won every time at the Apex, I really want to go to the Apex, or I love the fact that there's not a lot of crowd there, I'm much more comfortable in the Apex, I want to go there, coach, can you always try to get me just to the Apex, or the opposite? And what percentage of the guys do you think have at least some superstition? How many of them would you say have a lot, and how many are not superstitious at all?
Well, it's not, MMA is, I guess, superstitious. It's not. I actually play college baseball. Baseball is crazy superstitious.
Yeah,
so MMA seems like light work compared to baseball. But I've never really bought into the superstitious thing. And so it's, sometimes guys will be like, Coach, I'm fighting at, 11 p.m. Should I train at 11 p.m.? and my response is always like, if you were told to go fight in that parking lot right now, would it matter what time? You would just tap into your skills and go do your work. And so I think sometimes it can be looked into too much. I try to preach non-superstition, because it doesn't matter if you wore the same underwear, or if your gloves tape was exactly this way versus that. It doesn't matter. And here's why I say this. Every single fight is different. So the same fighter can have a fight with the same guy 10 times, and that fight is going to be different, and you're going to feel different, and the environment's going to be different, and the crowd's going to be different, or there's going to be no crowd or whatever. And so every fight is different. And so to try to say you're going to mimic what you did the time before exactly is wonky, in my opinion. So it's why I try to just spearhead through the bullshit and navigate through the bullshit of all that, because it's just, the superstition thing is now, look, if you believe it, then you believe it, and that's ultimately what matters, right? But what happens when the superstition thing didn't work? Then you change your superstition. Like, I don't know, that's the part that I always get caught up on, is what if you lost even though you had four in a row, and you did the same exact thing over and over and over again?
Right.
Now what do we do? What if you lost two in a row?
You're right. You go from thinking
Now what do we
lucky
do?
venue
And so then it's like,
yeah.
and I would say, I don't know the percentage. If I were guessing, I don't know, maybe half, 50%, maybe. That's a big guess though. So I really don't know. But I also, at least from my point of view and my perspective of my mentoring to my athletes, is it's all going to be different. You're going to feel differently constantly. Location could be the same, even venue could be the same, even, but something's different that day. It doesn't even mean different bad. It's just different. And so you can still feel a different way and get a same result, whether it's a loss or a win. And so, but it's, I try to preach away, away from that.
That makes sense. It seems like it's just something that could kind of complicate things that you don't need. So understand. You got about 6 minutes left. Let me throw you some rapid fire questions here. Give me like 30, 45-second answers. Short notice fights. We just saw an amazing combination of a former champion who was probably top 20, maybe even the start at middleweight if they ranked him, maybe not, but Kamaru Usman. And then we saw something we may never see again. The champion of a weight class agree to take a fight also on less than 2 weeks' notice. Usman seemed to turn out well. A lot of people feel he may have deserved the win over Hamzat, and that he would have wanted it with 5 rounds. Of course, Volk got caught, and thereafter not making excuses. He just mentioned he didn't feel good out there, and he didn't feel like himself. And yeah, I think it is a real thing, but give me your thoughts on how real a thing it is. Can it be overcome, or does it put the fighter at a decided disadvantage? In other words, like Volk probably wouldn't have got caught with that kick with a full camp, or probably would have. Or I know it's kind of a two-pronged question, but give me about a minute or less on that.
On short notice fights.
Yeah.
So, yeah, short notice fights kind of go two ways. One, they don't have enough time to overthink the damn thing, and so they just jump in there and they get the job done. And it's in and out, and they're like, bam, that's easy. And then they're get this addiction to want to do short notice because the mind doesn't get in the way. And so there's not enough time for you to over process what's coming up. The actual prepared for fights, let's just say it was 12 weeks, 16 weeks, something like that. The preparation time can be done properly. And so, in prep time, it's way easier to do that. In short notice time, sometimes you remove the mental issues that they would have, and they are able to go perform. The one thing I've learned as a coach, though, in short notice is you got to remove all markers that they had prior if they had a camp for a fight before. Meaning, let's say you ran a mile, your fastest run for a mile was 6 minutes. You can't have them go run a mile right now on a 10 day fight notice and have a marker, because what if it's 7? Does that mean we're going to do worse? And so, no, yes, there's just all those variables. So you got to take markers away when they have short notice stuff, and you got to go focus on them and then task at hand.
Absolutely. We got about 3.5 minutes left. Give me a minute on Brandon Royval. What does the raw dog have for Pantoja? Obviously, you got a strategy. Can't give it away, but what are we thinking that Brandon has that he is going to do better than Pantoja, and why do we feel that Brandon's ready for this fight and ready to win if he can?
Yeah, so Brandon, obviously is getting ready to fight for the world title at 125 pounds. We're super excited about that. Pantoja is a tough task ahead. But because we were in there with Pantoja before and the result we had, I feel like that's why we're going to win. I mean, at the end of the day, what Brandon learned from that, what we learned from that, what we already knew going into that fight is massive. But what we learned coming out of that fight is why we're going to go prevail and become a world champion in December.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a great performance too. I was thinking that Moreno would beat Pantoja. Pantoja edged him. Pantoja is a tough guy. God bless him. Amazing for him to be champ. But I just have a strong feeling he's going to be one and done as champ. And so I really feel that Royval looks good. Let's take a quick look at those odds if we can here. And do they have them even up? And it looks like they don't have them up yet. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. It's about a 2-1. They got Royval about a 2-1 dog, which makes sense. The champ's always going to be favored. But I like those odds for Brandon, and he's an amazing guy. I interviewed him a few times back as well, and very impressed with him. Real good kid, and love to see a Factory X champion there. You deserve it. All the hard work and all the great guys there. Well, let us know in the last minute and a half we have here. Let us know where people can support Factory X and you yourself online on social media.
Yeah, no, we appreciate your continued support, and just thank you guys for all the love, the hate, whatever you guys got. We use it in both ways. But yeah, the gym can be found Factory X Muay Thai on all social media. I can be found Coach Marc Montoya on all social media outlets, and so the fighters are constantly tagged in all of our stuff. So if you have stuff for the fighters, fan mail, any of that stuff, you just send it to the Factory X spot, and our guys are really good about getting fan mail back and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's where you can find us. Obviously, we're located in Inglewood, Colorado, so we're just looking forward to continuing to grow and flourish and find ways to go be successful men and women.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Coach. We're about to get cut off here, but thank you so much, man. Always a pleasure. Coach Marc Montoya, head coach of Factory X. Great talking to you. Thanks for your time, my friend.
Thank you, my man. I appreciate you. Keep killing it.
Will do. Thanks a lot. Talk soon.